This one's charging.
It's just the core. That's just the
If it drops out, it snaps out.
I know that's Tinder.
I'm just here to do the housekeeping introductions kind of thing. So my name is Jason Neve. I'm a director of an incubator here in Adelaide called the Moonshine Lab. So this is our office. Sherwood was looking for someone to host the event, and we, through Startup Grind and South Start Conference and our own events, we try to get people into the house and have beers and wine as often as possible, just to keep the community stuff going along. So if you need to find a bathroom, there's one out the front door, turn left and go through the push door. There's a couple of bathrooms in there. We're only about 2 weeks into this, 3 weeks into the space, so forgive the fact it's looking a bit Spartan and maybe not quite as polished as it will end up being, but enjoy the night. We'll hand over to the guys, and the only thing I was going to say is the Moonshine Lab, as an incubator, just helps non-tech founders build products. So we have 5 or 6 startups in our portfolio, and I'm about to do an intake for a few more. We also operate the South Start Conference in Adelaide. We just took that over, and that's running on November 21, 22, 23. So I think there's some press in tomorrow's paper about tickets going on sale and invitations for speakers and announcements for sponsors. So if you're interested in getting on the conference, check out tomorrow's story, and I'll hand over to you guys.
Okay. Oh, we got some music here. I know there's a dance sign downstairs, so people can dance as well. But I don't think we get the dance to Mark, although we may dance afterwards. It's time to turn it on. Is that for me? Okay. Good evening. My name is Arthur Hazenfeld, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you here tonight. I'm one of the steering committee members of Konkrete. I've been asked to do so since probably 1.5 hours ago, since the wedding days. Yes. And I mean, who's familiar here with blockchain? Yes? Who's familiar here with cryptocurrency? Yes? Who's familiar here with property? Right, who's an accountant? No one. Who's in the real estate business? 1, 2, 3, 4. Great. I mean, it's great the interest we're getting in the marketplace. Okay. And tonight we're going to be introducing to, well, the founders, Sean and Morris, what Konkrete is and what Konkrete will do within the real estate industry, but also utilising blockchain technology, okay, to facilitate their services in the marketplace. Tonight is actually the first event. Yes. This will be followed by Melbourne on Wednesday night. Yep. I think it'll be another online webinar. Friday night, the Red Velvet Friday, and then most likely to Sydney, and throughout Australia and possibly overseas. So we'll be starting here. So again, I want to thank you for coming. No doubt you may have some questions about people within the real estate industry, or people within the blockchain arena as well. Please feel free to ask them once a presentation is finished, that we can have an interactive session on here, or interactive over a drink or a bar to eat. But welcome and enjoy the journey. Thank you for coming. Yes? Sean.
Thanks, Arthur. Thanks everyone for coming. I'm Sean. I'm one of the founders behind Konkrete with Roadshow. Today's my first day in Adelaide. I should have come here sooner. I loved it. I do love it. So, we went to, what was the restaurant we went to this afternoon? It's like a French restaurant.
Hey Jupiter.
Hey Jupiter, yeah.
Cafe.
Had a very nice croque monsieur. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but it was very nice and cheesy. I've got to come back and spend a few more days and visit wineries and all that good stuff. But welcome. Today we want to talk about what we're doing with Konkrete, why we're doing Konkrete, how we started the project, and why we think the blockchain opportunity is a good fit for what we're trying to build here. So I'm going to run through just a bit of a presentation, and then I'll bring Maresh in to talk about some of the more technical details around the project, and then we'll open up for Q&A, because I think that's where we'll get the most value between the interaction between people that are interested in blockchain, real estate, and startups, to again inform us of what sort of questions and answers we should be thinking about going forward. So why did we start Konkrete? This is one of the things. We as Australians, we love our property. I don't think there's ever been a conversation I've been in for more than 10 minutes where property hasn't come up. But for younger people in particular, it's taking an average of 8.7 years to save up for a deposit for a house in Sydney now, 6.7 for Melbourne. I think it's a bit better in Adelaide, but I'm sure with the general trend of things, it's getting harder and harder to save for a deposit. Now that's not to say that younger people don't want to own property. I think a survey that was done recently, 3/4 of young people have home ownership as something that they want to achieve. It's just that even with their jobs, plus some lifestyle choices, we want to go out more, we want to travel with friends, it's taking increasingly longer to save up for a deposit. Obviously one of our ministers made a joke about us eating too much smashed avocado, and that's the reason why we can't afford property. So people are kind of running with that. On the other end of the spectrum, if you own your house, if you're a retiree, for example, and you want to access the value that you've experienced in your house, you have very limited options at the moment. If you don't have an income, it's hard to go back to the bank and refinance. There are other mortgage programs out there, but it's not ideal. You don't want to be taking on more debt later in life potentially. So we started to think about these two core problems and started to come up with a different solution. That's how much property is worth in Australia alone. We have a lot of money in real estate. And this is just residential real estate, by the way, not commercial. So this is our houses. It's a huge market. So every time we talk about startups and what market we're going after, that's one of the things we need to look at. Is it a big enough problem, and is it a big enough market that if we do as well as we expect to do, are we going to make a dent in that? So what we came up with was a bit of a marketplace solution where we could connect people who wanted to invest in property and somehow marry that up to people who wanted to buy property. How could you get those two groups to help each other out? This is where some of the blockchain stuff comes in, and we'll talk about that more in detail a little later on. But what we envisioned was a platform that could allow you to invest in property from as little as $100. Your investments are instantly liquid because it's a blockchain-based system with tokens. Leverage returns, and this is something we'll actually talk about a bit further down the line as well, because there are other platforms out there, but we don't think they're really hitting the nail on the head. And you can do good with your investment. What if your investment can help a young Australian get into their own house? What if you could help them get into the property market today, rather than saving up for 7 years and then finding out the property has grown another 7 years out of their reach? So you might be aware of some fractional property platforms out there where you can invest in property with small amounts, but they're not really true marketplaces, and I'll let Maresh talk about that a bit more in a minute as well. Just sort of keep that in the frame of mind. So how do we achieve this? What we're proposing to do is build a distributed registry, and this is where blockchain is key to what we're doing. It's an underlying infrastructure where a fractional fund will be one of the offerings that go on there. And this is because when we were doing all of the work around how we develop this fractional property fund, we discovered that all the work that needs to go into making that a reality, we should be able to open that up to other issuers and offerings down the line. We don't want to be the only one with the fund on top of our Konkrete platform. We want to think of Konkrete as like ASX or like Gumtree or Amazon. You know, we want to be the platform that can facilitate all these different kinds of offerings. And Roadshow will talk about what he's doing at Estate Garden already down the line. But other third-party offerings will be able to issue on Konkrete as well. So the platform can do this. It's KYC complete, which means we'll be able to do compliant securities on the platform. Peer-to-peer, because it's blockchain, instant liquidity, transparent recording of votes, and then using smart contracts, we can do tracking of limits. Three main reasons we're using blockchain, and actually the whole reason this thing kicked off in the first place is because like everyone wants to do something in blockchain, but we wanted to make sure that it was not a solution looking for a problem. We started with the problem and discovered that blockchain could really solve these fundamental things. We've got distributed governance. It's an immutable, transparent ledger that everything will be kept on. Massive investor reach. The big problem with a lot of other platforms is that they've got small investor bases. We can go global from day one because it's blockchain. And liquidity. Obviously, if you have tokens in a fund that owns a whole bunch of property, you don't need to wait for something to sell before you can realize a gain. You can trade freely on the secondary market. In terms of the platform itself, how we envision it will make money is through the administration of voting, secondary transactions, investor updates, fundraising, and listing fees. So this is what we mean by being a platform. We don't want to necessarily set other than the fund that we'll run ourselves, we want other people to do as much as they want on the platform, and we want to facilitate as many of those transactions as possible. So who are we? Some of you might have heard before, Naresh is the founder of Estate Baron. That's a startup that's been around for coming up to 4 years now. And I'm one of the co-founders of Konkrete Campus. Konkrete Campus is a corporate accelerator, so we've been in the space for about 4 years. We started in Melbourne, we've got an office in Singapore now. And we work with generally the big end of town and the corporate innovation strategies. So last year we worked with a big law firm, Mills Oakley. We have Clifford Chance as one of our clients, one of the biggest law firms in the world. We work with Village Roadshow this year to run their first VR and AR accelerator program. And we also work with Charter Hall, which is a big Sydney-based property REIT with around 25 billion under management to run Australia's first property tech accelerator program. And that's actually how we started to work very closely with Naresh. Here are some of the startups we've incubated. And just a few logos there, just to see some of the stuff that we've done. You know, we work with corporates, and we incubated a whole bunch of our own startups as well. And I'll give it over to Naresh to just talk about his background with the startup.
So, hi, my name is Naresh. So I run a property development crowdfunding company, which is currently operational, has been around for just getting close to 4 years now. And what we do currently is we help property developers raise funding for their development projects by doing what is essentially an IPO. So we do it in a fully compliant manner, and what you can do is you can go on the website right now, Estate Baron, and see various property development projects and choose to invest with small amounts. The underlying compliance is the same as what you would have when you invest in a public company on the stock market. So it comes to the full prospectus, and it's a public company. Every project is its own separate public company with a separate prospectus lodged with ASIC. So you can basically check out the offer and see the details of it, download the offer document, and decide whether or not you want to invest. And the way you get your returns is when the development project completes, the property for whatever it is being built is sold, and then whatever return was promised you is being sold. So fully online platform, you can submit it under the prospectus. We are doing it in a fully compliant fashion. We operate under a full AFSL. You can sign it, submit it, and we have assisted almost 15 property developers. This is a bit dated, but till date we have raised more than 12 million through our own networks. Over 3,100 investors registered on the platform, and 15 projects till date in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, and Perth coming up. We don't have a project in Adelaide yet, but hopefully soon. So it's already there, it's already live, but the current focus is on your property developments. Where we plan to take this thing further is we want to take what we have done at Estate Baron and make it scale at the mass. So right now we are helping the property developers, but down the line what we want to do with Konkrete is we want to help the everyday Australian to crowdfund their deposits or release equity. And that's what Konkrete is basically a natural evolution of what we do at Estate Baron. And as part of Konkrete, like Sean explained, we are building the underlying infrastructure to support everything, but we are going to create our own fractional property fund, which will run on Konkrete, but Konkrete will be open to other different security offerings as well. So it will, Estate Baron existing offers will run on Konkrete, the fractional fund will run on Konkrete, and the other, if somebody else has a different business for which they want to raise money for, they can still use the Konkrete underlying plan.
Awesome. So we've put together a pretty cool team. Myself and myself, Arthur, on our steering committee. We've got Carla and Mark as well, part of Konkrete. We think for the project to succeed, we needed to surround ourselves with people from all different walks of life and from experiences. So we've got property developers on our board. We've got people from the startup or people from the crypto space. And through getting everyone's ideas in one room together, it's really helped us refine what kind of targets we should be aiming for and what kind of technology we should be working on in the first instance. Here are some of our timelines. Estate Baron and Collective Campus, just coincidentally, we were both founded in 2014. Monash released the white paper early this year. We're going to be doing a share sale later this year. The platform will launch next year. And the long-term vision is that we'll have a global real estate-backed currency through the, because at the end of the day, people investing in the Konkrete fractional fund are investing in someone's deposit in property in Australia, which is a very safe place to put your money. Monash?
Yeah, so now Sean has talked about how we can help people invest with small amounts in property, but I don't think anybody actually is losing sleep that they can't invest in property with $100. What people are really interested in, or what people are really worried about, is on the other side of the spectrum, they are worried about how they can crowdfund their deposits, or how they can save enough money for their deposits, how they can achieve enough. And on the other side of the spectrum, people who have already built wealth in their properties, they are thinking about how they can access it without selling it. Because I'm quite sure some of you are aware of reverse mortgages, and there are a lot of issues with reverse mortgages. The debt keeps on growing. It's not a very good product, to be honest. So there are those two issues which people are really struggling with. And to be completely honest, none of the existing problems actually solve it. Now, there are a few platforms, and I won't name drop, but they are actually selling their own property. What they are doing is they're buying the property in a trust, and they're selling units in that trust. Now, there are a few different issues with that model. The first one is, number one, they are really pushing their own product. They're not really helping you. The second issue is if really they wanted to help you and they said, okay, you put the property, you bring your property and you put it in a trust, which means that the title changes. The title has to be in a trust, which means you can't get any first homeowner's grant, you can't get any stamp duty concessions, you can't get any CGT exemptions. And more importantly, when the title is transferred to a trust, there will be a stamp duty event, there will be a CGT event. Okay? So, and who's going to transfer their property into a trust to access it? Nobody's going to do that. Okay? So that's one. The second big thing is, I think anybody who's invested in property knows that property is interesting because you can borrow against it. Okay? So you have a $500,000 property, you put 50,000 as deposit, borrow the rest. Property goes to 600,000, you get all the capital. Property as an investment is interesting because you can leverage. Okay? So what happens when you buy the property in a trust in these platforms is, number one, most of the time you won't have any leverage because the platforms become responsible for the debt. And where they do have leverage, they will limit it only to very small LVRs and positive cash flow only. And they will only limit it to, the only borrowings which they will allow are limited recourse, which means the interest rates are higher. So all of that means that when you are investing in a fractional property fund, fractional property based offerings, which are the existing ones in Australia, or even worldwide to be honest, the returns which you get on them are really, really bad. Whereas the returns which you get when you invest directly in property, if you can save enough and if you can borrow, they are much superior. So when somebody says, or the or all the other platforms, or anybody even in Australia or worldwide says that, okay, now you can invest in property with $100, but is it really a good investment? So one of the big things which we want to make sure is, one, are we solving a real problem where people are struggling to save enough money for their deposits or releasing equity? And two, when we ask investors to help people, those who want to release equity or save for their deposits, is it a good enough return? Is it a strong return? Okay. So those two things we obsessed over, and that's how we came up with a better platform, which we'll explain. Yeah, so what we envision really is, we are envisioning a model where the property will be in your own name, and yet we are creating a structure where people can invest in a fund which will allow them to get exposure to the capital gain experience by the property. The details will be in the offer document. I mean, we are setting up an option structure, etc. Can get a bit technical, but on one side we are helping people who want to crowdfund their deposits, and on the other side what we are doing is we are helping people who want to invest in property gain exposure to that particular property with the capital gain. Now, I'll talk a little bit about property development because it's a little bit in conjunction with which we do already. So right now we at Estate Bank do property development crowdfunding. So the fractional property, the distributed ledger which we are building is a bit like the ASX. Okay? So on the ASX you can have different investment offerings. You can have BHP, you can have Telstra, or you can have any other investment offering. So similar to that, what we are building is, in order to do what we need to do for the fractional property fund, we are building this distributed ledger, and that distributed ledger can then be used by other issuers, including existing property development issuers on Estate Bank. Now, how many of you actually understand the term distributed ledger? Okay, few. I'll sort of go into a little bit of detail because of that. So when you have the ASX, when you are investing in something, that investment is attractive because either there's a good return or it's a safe investment. But one of the important things which people also look at is, when will I get my money back? Okay. So what is the return? When will I get it back? Now, when you are investing in the stock market, there is no fixed time frame about when you will get your money back. Okay. What you are basically relying on is the secondary market. So where you sell your share to someone else. Now, in case of the existing structures, we have what is called as a centralized system, the ASX, where if you want to sell your share, you basically put it up for sale on the centralized stock market, and then if somebody wants to buy it, they can basically make an offer and then you get matched. So it's a centralized system. There's one central party which basically describes who owns which shares. And there's only one record where everybody can go and update. So when a transfer happens, that centralized record gets updated. Now, where blockchain is interesting, and that's not just true of what we do, but where blockchain is really interesting, is it eliminates the need for a trusted third party. Okay? So which means that if you guys, all of you guys, own shares in the fractional property fund or some other investment or something else, then you don't need to come to a central party if two of you do an exchange. So you guys, two guys, can exchange things between you, and everybody else will get updated with that record. And that's something which makes blockchain very powerful. It eliminates the need for a trusted third party. Okay? So Bitcoin is very powerful because there is no central third party which sort of issues Bitcoin or which backs Bitcoin. Yet the trust is maintained. So the beauty of blockchain is that you don't need a trusted third party. What makes Konkrete interesting is that we are taking the same concepts which are there in Bitcoin, which is the lack of need for a trusted third party to keep track of who owns what, and we are applying it to securities. Okay? So what we are going to do is we are going to maintain the ledger, which is the record of who owns what, with every single individual. Okay? So which means that if any change in the ledger happens, if any change in the records happen, everybody will get updated, and that's what makes the whole thing very powerful. You don't need a trusted third party, which means that once your underlying shares are recorded on that distributed ledger, they are implicitly liquid. You don't need them to be listed on the stock market. It completely eliminates the need for a stock market. Okay? So which means that any offer which uses this thing as the backend, the distributed ledger, doesn't have to be listed. Now some of you may be aware that listed companies, public companies carry a premium, okay? Which means that they carry, because it's easier to invest in them, because you can get out very easily, they carry a higher valuation. Now, but it also means that a lot of people who list, they have to do a lot of paperwork, they have to do a lot of compliance related issues. But what we are doing is we are replacing the ASX in some shape or form and saying that anybody who uses this system doesn't have to actually go to the ASX. We are doing it on the blockchain, which is accessible worldwide. We'll be able to access and distribute our investment offers worldwide in a compliant manner. We are going to ensure that anybody who signs up on this, we complete their KYC, we meet the AML CTF requirements to ensure that the money is clean, etc. But we are doing instant wide distribution to anybody who lists with us, and those offers which are listed are inherently liquid. Now this makes it very powerful, not just for our existing offer of the fractional property fund, but also anybody else who is looking to raise capital for their own ventures. Okay. So that is the whole beauty of the whole model. Okay. And yeah. So basically we are saying that it's not just our fund which will be listed on the Konkrete platform, other people can also list on the platform. Do you have any questions?
Short and sweet, we wanted to basically just talk about what we're working and then open it up for questions, and I think that's where we'll get.
It shouldn't be a one-way street.
I mean, right now we've got a website, so you guys can go to Konkrete.io and check out some of the marketing collateral on there. And we've got a white paper and there's some technical documentation going on as well. That's our email address if you want to get in touch, and come find out. We've got some cards on me as well. We've also got a Slack group set up. So Slack is basically a messaging tool. Anyone's welcome to jump on there and be part of our community, ask questions, contribute, put ideas forward. We're trying to really build a community around this. But if you have any questions for Konkrete,
I have a question. I don't understand any of this, but I was thinking of something as you were talking. If I wanted to sell a project, you're talking about projects of there that you sell to your base, is that correct?
In case. Yeah.
So if I have a completed development that I want to put into this system, is that possible, and how would it happen?
So if you are trying to sell your, are you saying that, okay, I have, let's say 3 townhouses or 4 townhouses which I've completed,
Yes.
are they sold to somebody else, or do you
No, they own, say they're owned by the owner.
Okay. As in owner, as in you are the owner, or so they are sold them to
Yeah,
somebody?
well, this is our fantasy, so yes, I'm the owner.
Okay. So yeah, so in that sense, it would be work exactly like the equity release mechanism, which we discussed. So your properties will be listed where you will say, okay, I'm offering a share in my properties for other people to buy. That's exactly it.
Then when people do that, then the person who owns the property gets the money.
But
Then once they reach, who decides on how much that property is worth? Well, I'll give you a real example, because it's actually a hotel, a motel with about 40 odd rooms. So say it's got a valuation of anything between 4 and 6 million.
sure.
So how does that fit into your system?
Yeah, so to be completely honest, right now we are not going to do commercial, but that's thing aside. Let's say there is a property and it's a residential property, then we'll have a valuer. It will be, for most residential properties, desktop valuations work fine really, and then based upon that we'll say, okay, this is the current value of the property, and if the fund which we are going to set up buys 10, let's say the property was valued at $1 million, and we buy 10% stake in your property, then we give you 100,000. So that's how it works.
But then can the person who owns that property then go and sell it to my friend here?
Yes,
The rest
but
and she
let's
can
say,
live in it.
so let's say we gave you the money today, 100 grand.
Yes.
5 years from now, the property is now worth 2 million. We sold it for 2 million. Our stake is still 10%, so we get 200. Depending upon the specific transaction, those ratios can change because we actually want to give people a leverage return. But that's the general essence of it.
So if I sold you 10% of my property, I still control the property. I can still rent it out.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it will be in your name. You can.
But I give you 10% of the rent.
No, actually. So this is getting into a bit of implementation, but what we are envisioning is we don't actually want to collect rent on the fraction, and the reason is more administrative than anything else. So in Australia, the rental yields are not very high versus the actual value of the property. The value of rent is not very high, the yields are low, which means that to collect the share of the rent, then apply all the administration and then distribute it to so many investors, there's a lot of work which goes into it. Okay? We don't want to do that because we want to keep costs low. So what we are, in structure which we are envisioning, we actually want to not collect rent from you, but in return, what we are willing to offer, what we want you to do is, you pay for all the outgoings. So even if we own 10%, we pay for the council fees, upkeep, maintenance, legals, etc. So that way it balances out. If you run the numbers, you actually come out ahead. But that's the, so investors, what we are offering investors is more of capital, which is more advantageous to the investors in the long run.
Right, I understand it. Well done.
Thank you.
So if you've got somebody that's doing a development and they actually wanted to keep the development at the end, would that work?
Yeah, so in that case, we are basically going to now let's talk about it from two different angles. One is raising money for the development itself.
Yep.
That we do at Estate Baron only, where we assist property developers to raise equity funding for the projects. Technically, you can do the entire stack, and you can be senior as well, depending upon investor interest. And then at the end of the day, you can pay out the investors from the sale. If you can't, you don't want to sell, you can refinance it. But if the refinance is not enough, then what you can do is you can take the completed stock and release equity, just like the example which we saw before, and then you can take it.
Yep. And so at some point in time, you could actually buy that equity that you sold if there wasn't enough to
So the way
at some point in time
to go into a little bit of detail, we structured it. We have basically structured it as an option agreement, which allows the fund to buy a property at today's price X years from now. Which means that after X years, if the property price has increased, the value of the cap gain is in the option. So which means that you can actually buy out the option from us by paying what the value of the option is. So you can buy us out, although you can buy the fund out.
I've got a question. You're talking about two different things here. You're talking about funding a deposit for people, obviously, that can't save a thing. Let's assume they're, for the argument, they're first home buyers. So if we're funding a deposit and I'm putting my money in, what security do I have?
Yeah, so whether it's funding a deposit or whether it's equity release, we are thinking that it will be ranked behind the senior lender. It will be a second mortgage, which will rank behind the senior lender.
Well, that doesn't give me a lot of security.
You can choose not to invest.
And if we're talking about a development, then what amount will the developer have to put in as deposit?
I didn't understand the question.
So let's say I'm a developer. Let's say, for instance, I want to develop 10 townhouses.
Yeah.
And I want to use you to fund them.
Sure.
So am I funding it completely through you, or am I funding
so
only the
that is more of an estate baron question, where it's really we actually do the entire spectrum. So which means that it's up to you what kind of offering you want to offer. So you can say that, okay, I'm not going to put any money in, but I want all the money to come in from investors. Or you can say I'm going to fund 90% of it and 10%, or basically 70% from the bank, 15% from your pocket, 15% from investors. So you can come up with any formula. At Estate Baron, what we do is we really assist you to set up the structures, and then investors decide whether or not they like the offer. So we are not really fund managers, we are really enablers. We create the platform, and we obviously will give you recommendations on what has worked before, what investors enjoy. So based upon that, you can make your own decisions. But what kind of offering which you want to make, whether it's on Estate Baron and to some extent on Konkrete as well, we leave it with your hands.
Well, I am a developer.
Sure.
So when I borrow from the bank,
Yep.
I've got to put in 35% equity.
Sure.
That protects the bank
Yep.
from if I go bad and the development goes bad.
Yeah.
The bank has equity of 35%.
Sure.
I've got to put in 35%.
Yeah.
So let's say I want to borrow that 35% from you.
Okay.
Would you
So
lend me the 35%?
yeah. So you're not borrowing from us. We are not fund managers. What we do is we basically help you do an IPO for that 35%, and then people are becoming, in a sense, equity investors in your project.
Okay. get that. So what's the return for those people?
Again, you decide.
As second mortgagees.
Yeah, so you decide what rate of return you want to offer the investors, and then the people will decide whether or not that offer is good enough. So we say that we have a certain range in mind which we recommend to the developers. It's between 10 and 20, 10 and 20% annualized. 10 to 20% annualized.
10 to 20.
10 to 20. It's preferred equity. But again, depending upon the project, depending upon the stage, depending upon the risk, those numbers change. So it's really up to you.
Okay. The other thing, let's go back to the first-time buyer.
Yeah.
Because the problem that we have is that as a first-time buyer, the banks will want to see that that's their savings, not money that's put in.
Yeah.
How are you going to get over that?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. It's genuine savings thing.
Yeah.
A lot of banks actually want it. So we are not saying that we'll be actually funding the entire deposit. We actually want some buffer for the investors who participate via the fund as well. We are going to say that, okay, you still need to save some money. We are not saying that, okay, anybody can show up and then you don't do anything, you just borrow and then you buy property. No. We still want you to have your own savings. Where we are actually going to help with is, let's say you have 50 grand in savings, but that's not enough for you to get a property which is just a little bit beyond your budget. So that's why we are saying, okay, we'll come in for a little bit more alongside you, maybe the same amount, 50 grand, and that's where we will be working alongside them, and we will be we'll be very transparent with the senior lender, and we are actually going to work with senior lenders who understand and agree to a structure.
And for me as an investor, if I'm putting money in, how do I know that that person we're lending money to has the capacity to repay?
So number one, he does not repay. It's you are investing in the quality of the underlying property. This is not structured as a loan. This is an equity arrangement where people are buying a share in the property and they are not becoming another lender. So it's not a debt-based collateralization. It's people are investing in the equity. So that particular person who is taking on the money, he's never going to repay. I mean, he can repay at future date, but he's not expected to repay. It's based upon the property's value.
But at a certain point, I'd want to get my money back.
Yes, so that's where the secondary market comes in.
So we get them to a point where the equity grows enough that they can secure that loan on their own. I assume that's what you go.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So what time frame are we thinking about?
5 to 7 years.
Right.
5 to 7 years.
So my money's in that for 5 to 7 years.
Because it's blockchain though, it's instant liquidity because your tokens represent your ownership in the fund.
Yeah.
So you don't have to wait 5 to 7 years.
You can sell them, I understand.
Yeah.
Provided someone's to buy
But
it.
let's say if I can't sell those, let's say I invest and nobody else wants to buy those.
So I'll talk about that a little bit. That's a pretty interesting question because see, liquidity is a function of how many people are part of the network. Okay. So for example, if it's just Sean and me who are part of the investor network and I have something which Sean does not want to buy, then it's kind of pointless. But as the number of people in the room increase, let's say there are like 20, 30 people here, so then the chances of somebody actually not wanting to buy increase a little bit. And if we go beyond that, then the chances of actually being liquid actually increase more. That's where what we are trying to do with the blockchain is we'll be able to distribute the product to a global audience, which means the chances of this fund being liquid are a bit higher. Okay. Now, obviously there is always a chance that you invest in the fund and then there's no liquidity to it, you'll have to stay invested. But our objective is to make the fund as liquid as possible, as fast as possible. And for that, what we are actually doing is we are setting up a diversified fund, which means that people are not buying into a specific property. The way we have structured it is people are buying into a pool of, in a pool fund, and that pool fund is then going to invest in various different properties. The advantage which this has is every unit in this fund is equal to every other unit in the fund, which means it is fungible, which means that the chances of it being liquid is much higher if, as opposed to people investing in a specific property, because that would sort of fragment the entire investment.
Each and every one of those loans is going to be at a different rate, somewhere between 10 and 20. So at the end of the day, if I'm buying those Bitcoins or the blockchain, I'm going to want to know what the return is on that fund.
It will be based upon the aggregated return of the underlying properties.
And you're going to make that, you're going to disclose that?
Absolutely, yeah. It will be an MIS, full PDS, and I mean, we will say, okay, this is the type of investments that will happen via this fund. Future returns obviously cannot, I mean, it will be based upon which properties are selected. But what we are doing as part of this is we are sort of making the selection process of which property is bought out of our own hands. So the way it will work is the fund investors will actually vote on which property is selected for the acquisition of the fund.
That's okay. So for my money that I put in, do I get a monthly return?
We are actually planning to not distribute rental yields because residential rental yields in Australia are very low. So we are actually trying to avoid that because the amount of
you breach the law then.
Sorry?
The finance laws.
Not completely accurate. We can discuss this in detail, but the way we are structuring it, it sort of gives exposure to a specific property, and it's not necessary that you are actually distributing the rents for that. I have an AFSL.
So if I've got a certain amount of money invested,
Yeah.
do I get a return?
Yeah, absolutely.
No,
but it is
not when I sell it, but as I go.
It will depend upon. Actually, we are not planning to distribute yields on that.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I'd have to wait possibly 7 years.
True.
To see a return.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Good. Couple of questions for you.
Yeah.
One is on ownership and on your your side, your parent company. In order to do an IPO in Australia, you need either a merchant banking license or a financial services license.
Yep.
Your company has that.
Yes, absolutely.
So you operate under that umbrella
Yeah.
to issue legitimate IPOs, right?
Yeah, but that is not completely accurate. In order to do an IPO, you don't necessarily need an AFSL,
Right.
but we have it anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
So you do like IPO like merchant bank does for a listed company. That's what you're doing.
Yeah.
A listed company, effectively.
Yeah. So, in order to do an IPO, you need to be a public company, and you need to issue a prospectus.
That's right.
In order to issue a prospectus, it depends upon which specific type of investment you are doing, how the structure is. So, depending upon that, you may or may not need an AFSL.
Yeah.
We have an AFSL which we actually don't need.
Right. So if I'm a developer and I want to use this, not the Konkrete, well, Konkrete eventually, but this platform to raise funds,
Yeah.
what's the percentage cost of it? Because that's quite costly to do an IPO in Australia.
Correct.
It's quite costly. What is the percentage, or what do you see?
Yeah. So
percentage
again,
of the project, is it
Yeah,
1%,
so the-
2%, or is it 5%?
yeah. So we actually do a flat fee structure. Again, I'm talking a little bit about estate pattern. But what we have done at Estate Baron is we basically saw that, okay, the process of doing an IPO is very expensive,
Yeah.
but property development is a very standardized thing. I mean, every property development may be different to every property development, but the stages are really the same. Buy land, plans, develop, sell. Okay? So what that means is the offer document itself, we can create templates around it, and that's what we have done. We have basically created commoditized templates, and then when we do our every IPO, we basically replace the specifics of the offer. You can do 100 townhouses or 20 apartments or something else. The structure of the investment offer in terms of the documentation is really the same, which allows us to keep the costs very low, which are the flat fee for that, which I'll be happy to disclose in detail. I mean, it's on Estate Baron, you can check it out. But which are the flat fee? We won't charge any percentages. That's really it.
And then, so then, just going on that, then your ownership structure then, with real estate. In order to IPO, issue shares.
Yeah.
Issue shares, people buy shares,
Correct.
you own shares in the company,
Yeah.
public company,
Yeah.
and the company trades and the company issues, gives either dividends, go back, or it issues profits, which go to dividends, or can sell shares.
Yeah.
With property, you have ownership of the property, how does, or through Konkrete, how are you going to, actually its ownership structure, is it through a trust, an unlisted trust, or listed trust, or is it
Yeah.
through, or just two shares in the company, and the company will then own a percentage of the property,
Yeah.
as tenants in common or joint tenants, how
Yeah.
is that?
So
Do
I
you
talk
want
about
the
property
existing
developments
owners,
first. I talk about property developments first, and then I talk about
Yeah.
concrete-based fractional property
Yeah.
fund. So in terms of what we do at Estate Baron for property developments, we have a pretty standard structure. What we do is the property. Usually you have an SPV. It usually a PTY as trustee for something. So that's usually owns the land, and that takes on the senior. And what we do is we set up a separate public company, unlisted public company, which issues a prospectus, and that company has a loan agreement with the main company. So investors actually participate in this, and that company makes a loan. There are several reasons why we do that. Again, this is a bit technical for the common person.
But it's important to know because
Yes.
that means that the company is not directly owning.
Correct, and there are a few different
So loan.
reasons. There are a few different reasons why we do that. One is usually that company, the land, actually has a senior debt on it.
Yeah.
If they become shareholders in it, then they become exposed to the debt. The second thing is if you sell down shares in an entity which owns the land, there could be a stamp duty event. So those are two good reasons to separate that. So that's why we have chosen that structure.
That's all working at the moment through a state barrier.
That's currently working.
So how is that going to translate to concrete?
So the way it works, so the way it works on, as far as the state barrier and concrete are concerned, concrete is the distributed ledger, which means any shares which you buy into a project which is listed on a state barrier will be listed on concrete, which means that, see, you're a property developer. When people invest in a property development project, they have to wait for 2 years. Okay? So 2 years, 1.5 years, 3 years, depending on how long the project is. Okay? So during that process, there is no revenue and there is no exit mechanism here. So what advantage which concrete gives state barrier existing offers is it gives them a liquidity mechanism. So if somebody has invested in a project and they need money now, so they can basically find an investor who wants to take their position. It won't impact you as the property developer because you already raised the money, except the shareholding exchange hands, which is advantageous to the investor, and it helps you in the long run because if your offers are liquid, it means that your cost of capital has reduced. Okay?
So concrete will be basically a distributed ledger to
Correct.
facilitate the buying and selling of these securities.
Correct.
What do you call
Correct.
it?
And our fractional property fund is one of the offerings on it. It's our primary offering. We'll probably not be involved in any other offerings ourselves. That's the key offering, and to a large degree, we started with that fractional property fund structure first, then realized that we have to build this in order to make that happen, and then we realized that, okay, we can actually leverage it for other things as well.
Then the value of those units per construction over the 2 to 3 year period will then have to rise, and so have to be changed on a fairly regular basis, because if you buy plans from the developer, at the end of the time it's worth more because in actual fact you have something in reality.
Absolutely. So as the property development project gets to completion, or if it is stalled, then the value of those units should change. Whether or not we will be doing active valuation of those is a matter of question. We will probably leave it to people to determine what value those units has between themselves. For example, if you have a willing buyer who wants to buy those units, that's in theory how the share market also works. We can only give guidance on what stage that particular project is. We can give the information, but what price you exchange your shares in that development project with another party is between you and that particular buyer.
Dumb question, what happens if the asset goes down in value?
If the asset goes down in value, then the value of, so basically if you're talking about the fractional property fund, and let's say one property goes down in value, then it will definitely impact the overall value of the fund. But because the entire structure is diversified, your returns will be sort of diversified and you will not get completely hammered. But yes, I mean, it's an investment. I will never say to anybody who comes to a state bank or to anybody is that your investment is risk-free, you will never lose money. It's an investment, risk carries risk. It is property, but all investments carry risk.
But isn't it the natural development in any country in the world that properties go up and down all the time? So if the property value goes down, you just wait, you sit and wait.
Yeah. I mean,
in 140 years, Australian properties never lost money, but every 7 years, like we are now,
7 years.
it's a correction. Right? So it's, again, when you go in, when you come out, it's up to you.
What is the overhead position of a state baron or concrete?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
The overhead. So is there any overhead? Because that can pose a risk as well. So basically, if the overhead gets too expensive, can the business go bankrupt?
As in what?
A state baron, like...
The state baron is a 50-50 shareholder in concrete.
Yeah, but...
There's no, concrete doesn't have any debt.
No. And a state baron?
No debts.
No debts?
No. Okay. We are cash flow positive, we are profitable, and we don't have any debts.
Yeah, as a selected campus, it's all between myself and my business partner and the debts.
Okay.
So is there opportunity to get capital in on your current asset, but specifically for a family member? So I'm thinking if we wanted to fund our son into the property market, there's no direct relationship.
You're talking about a question which is more applicable in terms of self-managed super rather than for any ordinary investor. So in terms of being invested in a investing using self-managed super into the fund which then invests into some other people, See, it's an ATO question, and I think there is a specific court case going on right now which has a lot of bearing on it. But because we are not giving people specific exposure to a specific property, I don't think it will be a problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
One more for Sean.
Yep.
For what stage is the Konkrete platform at in development stages? Is a software platform? I've got a software engineering background, but are you in the initial stage? Have you done the specification? Have you started developing? And are you looking for investors to invest in? Will you be doing an IPO, basically, an initial coin ICO, I mean, coin offering? Is that what you're?
So I'll answer the ICO question, where we don't want to be another ICO. There's a lot of scrutiny, obviously.
That's right.
What we're doing here is all going to be ASIC compliant, obviously. We're doing a share sale.
A share sale?
Yeah, which allows people to buy preference shares.
So investors can just buy shares?
Exactly.
Okay.
We will be distributing them tokens because that's a key mechanism for us to get distribution, and we want people to start using and playing and building the community. But if they choose to invest in Konkrete, they'll be getting shares in the company, and not just tokens.
So basically what we are doing is we have set up this new entity, Konkrete, will be a public company, and right now we are doing a private share sale, but down the line what we are going to do is we are actually going to do an IPO for Konkrete itself, which will come with a full offer document to retail investors. People are buying shares in the company, and in addition to that, as Sean explained, we will be getting tokens as a bonus. We are not selling tokens, we are selling ownership in the underlying company. As far as technology development is concerned, this thing is basically using everything which State Bank already has, which is a fully developed product. And beyond that, what we are going to do is we are going to build the blockchain layer on top of it. We have an MVP which is currently being worked on, just for the blockchain side of things. But as far as the entire investment process is concerned, investor updates, dividend calcs, etc. is concerned, all of that is already existing.
So who holds the securities? Is it Konkrete?
Konkrete is a bit analogous to, when you say securities as in the offers which are listed on Konkrete.
So let's say for the lines that are given, obviously there's a second mortgage. That second mortgage has to be...
So, okay, the first thing which you need to understand is Konkrete is basically the underlying distributed ledger. So just like the ASX, it's a platform where all these offers are listed. If you want to invest in a specific offer, then the specific details of that investment offer will be written. And in terms of your specific question, it will be a separate managed investment scheme, which people will be investing in, and they will be paying.
Blockchain is secondary. So somebody has to hold that security. If you're putting a second mortgage over a property, somebody has to hold
the MIS will have a fund.
So there's a fund set up to cover that. Yeah. Second question, Konkrete. Obviously there's if you're going to sell it, there's got to be revenue. How does Konkrete make its revenue?
So listing fees, fundraising fees, transaction fees, KYC, AML, are basically, again, similar to how other platforms, whenever other users on board, taking a victim of those transactions. Whenever there's a secondary transaction, we can do a spread on both things. So
what sort of percentage are we thinking?
1.5 each side.
1.5%
of the transaction value each side.
And what potential for growth do you think?
Right now we are talking as far as, when we started with this, we started with the fractional property fund, and I think everybody here understands how big the property market in Australia is. We are helping people get into the property market as well as allowing people to release equity, and that's just one security offering. What we envision with this is we are using the underlying infrastructure to enable security offerings of all kinds. Charter Hall, for example, has already committed to using our platform for distributing their own existing unlisted REITs. They have listed REITs as well as unlisted REITs. They are planning to use the Konkrete platform to distribute their unlisted REITs, which, because they are able to achieve global distribution for that, all securities which are listed on the Konkrete platform will be making transaction fees of that.
Yeah, I understand. So, in a situation where you've got, they'll borrow 90%, someone wants to buy a house, they borrow 90%, you're funding 10%.
It's some hypothetical.
Or let's say 20%, because we've got to get past the mortgage insurance. So let's say you're funding, they're going to borrow 80%, you're funding 20%.
We won't do that.
Huh?
No,
it'd
we
be
won't-
more
we
like
won't take
10-10.
on. No, maximum we'll do 10K. But
Maximum
even
10.
beyond that, we will be putting up several checks and balances in terms of to assess the borrower's ability to bear that level of debt. It will be a separate fund itself, and it will have certain mechanisms to verify whether that borrower can do what he, not borrower, but even he still has to service his existing debt as well. So we will absolutely have checks and balances in there. But beyond that, the decision of whether or not the fund acquires a stake in that particular property will be left to a vote of the investors, which will happen. So just like in the AGM, but we'll be doing it more often, and that's possible because we are able to record votes in a transparent and immutable manner on the blockchain.
So if you're borrowing, if you're lending 10, they're putting in 10, bank will still require mortgage insurance.
That's a specific question. It's a specific scenario.
Yeah, they will.
Maybe. I don't
No,
know the
because
answer.
that's if they're putting in 10 and Concrete are putting in 10, that's an 80%
They'll
then.
still want.
No, because there's 5% stamp duty on a purchase of a house.
If it's an owner occupied,
Yeah,
then
there's always stamp duty.
no,
No, it's
well,
not
not in
the value
Victoria.
of the property, and depending on
There's
the
stamp
example
duty.
in Victoria, below 600 you don't have.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's the time frame? For example, you're going to put it to a loan for investors.
Yeah.
For example, if I put an offer on a property and okay, something fine is 2 weeks,
Sure.
I'll put in the acquiring 10%,
Mhm.
10%. I need the 10%.
Yeah.
How quick can I get an answer if you're going to fund it?
So that's a very good question. It's an implementation level question. Assuming we are able to pick up those, we will be able to deliver instantaneous results. But specific timelines about how many investors we are attracting, it's really a function of how many investors we attract to the platform. So one of the key things which we are planning to do as part of the complete platform is to attract as wide an investor base. That's also one of the big reasons we are actually doing a shared sale, which means that we have more committed investors who are invested. Even if you invest $100 in the platform, you are still a committed investor, which means that even if you don't invest, you're probably profitable. So we want to achieve as large distribution as possible as part of this.
Have you spoken to banks regarding banking?
Yeah, so
This is going to be a big lender's risk because this is not guaranteed funding. You need 20% or 10%, let's say 10% on this platform, plus fees on top of that, which is another anywhere between 2 and 5%.
yeah, so the specific numbers,
And then your home buyers average is 95% of its own occupied they can borrow up to.
yeah.
They won't see this as genuine true savings, but it's a very risky platform.
So the specific
Then
numbers,
so if you guys decide to close up on that system or they want their money back,
sure.
they're going to want the bank to get a second mortgage and you're going to go back to the client and say we want that money back ASAP because we're getting closed up. That's
So I'll answer the specific question which you have whether it's open to banks. Bendigo actually has a very similar product to this, where they are helping seniors with equity release, where they will get a percentage position in the property. Bendigo has an existing product which does exactly what we are
Yeah,
talking
the
about.
home equity line of
Home
credit.
equity,
Yeah, the
yeah.
HELOC. Yeah, the problem with the HELOC is that it's a government regulated product based on retirees over 55.
Yeah.
So it's a regulated industry product that you can do. Every bank offers that product and it's not very high uptake. It's used for people who to go to nursing homes, not as an equity line of credit. Because it causes a lot of problems. Because you've got to get independent legal advice from people who do need that HELOC point.
We have two major banks.
So when you get an equity line of credit, home equity line of credit, you've got to go to an independent lawyer and get independent financial advice. For the average person to go to a lawyer, they're going to need to do the same something
So
as this.
So number one, we will have to do an MRS for this with the full features, which means that in terms of asset, we have to follow all the conditions which are required. Obviously, all those things will have to be addressed. And there are at least two senior banks who are interested in working with us on this, and we will be completely disclosing the positions which we have with those banks. And only when they are actually interested in taking out that thing, then we'll be able to distribute that product. One of the big advantages to banks themselves to work with us is be able to get much more wider group of customers from this. That's one of the advantages of our banks actually doing that.
What would they get a wider group of customers if they represent up to 98% on some banks?
Right. So it actually reduces the amount of, basically whatever we put in, it also agrees on their side. We are actually using additional Java. So the areas which the areas actually get reduced. For example, so it will go on 10% because of what we are doing with something they are now able to do 20%. That means that the bank's position is actually much more secure than it is.
Only if the citizens
the thing is that the first homeowner isn't actually taking on another debt. It's an equity position that they hold, not a debt. So they're not going to actually have to.
Yeah, but that means on the transfer of the titles, you're going to need to put this as when you do a contract, you're going to need to put these people as a.
No, because he's already said that earlier in the piece, in that it's a different company that holds it, and there's the contract of sale and the title arrangement is one transaction. There's a secondary transaction off to the side, is my correct? That negotiates the ownership via sex, so that stamp duty transaction is avoided.
Very rarely will they let you get a second mortgage that easily without signing off on the original loan. So the bank will have to sign off to say, yes, we approve the second mortgage on top of the time, unless you do a hybrid interest loan.
At least in Victoria, the banks cannot really prevent you from taking on a second mortgage. At least in I'm not aware of other states laws, but at least in Victoria, the banks cannot prevent you from taking on a second mortgage.
Well, at least you're talking to banks that would simply offer.
Yes.
But two lenders obviously still happy with one. Everyone's no one else can accept it.
So are you creating a direct call system?
I didn't understand the question.
Banks will open a secondary mortgage with a direct call.
From the
Who's the direct call?
second director, I think I'll have to investigate the question. I don't know.
I don't see that they would be a guarantor.
They are.
They're an equity partner, not a guarantor.
That's exactly the same.
It's different to somebody doing a family pledge loan, because they are putting up their property and they're guaranteeing the security. But the company, the company is taking up an equity position, not a.
It's an equity position, but we'll investigate that. Anybody else? Questions? Sticks?
Having an education arm, so you can educate these people who want to buy home and all these sorts of things about how to invest.
We have detailed tutorials. This is very early stage. This is actually our first presentation, to be honest. So a lot of things which we are actually going to do is take on the feedback, which comes in, the questions which are coming in. We'll probably have our detailed FAQ. And remember that right now what we are doing is we are building the underlying infrastructure. So it's more about building the platform. And then the fractional fund will have its own this.
If I'm chatting with someone, obviously, if they're a first home buyer, for example, and they're asking the question, where do I send them? Like, so say, there's companies like that use blockchain and stuff like that, so why would go like, have a look at Konkrete? Is that the right stat? Like, how do we next state that?
Konkrete.
Okay, so I just send them straight to Konkrete?
Yeah.
And then they inquire through Konkrete?
Yes.
Cool. Well, yeah. Oh, one more question.
Yes. Sure. So,
well, as part of this share sale, it would be $1 for dollar value put on the tokens. One share would be one Australian dollar. There's a question in terms of who
how
gets
does that token appreciate in value?
Yeah.
So, number one, in terms of who gets the tokens, people who buy the shares get the tokens for a fee. In terms of the token value appreciating, the way we are actually seeing that the tokens should actually be doing something, which number one, the token will be used for people, like people who want to list on the platform. It will be used by people who want to pay transaction fees. And every time the transaction fee is paid, the token is born.
Excuse me, guys. We're trying to listen to him. We've got a lot of buzz in the background. Sorry.
Everyone's talking. Show a bit of respect for our presenters.
Thank you. So as the token gets born, the overall supply should get scarcer, which will increase the value of the token price. Yes, it will be universal.
Have you decided on a size share issue for your company?
Which share issue?
For Konkrete?
Didn't understand the question.
You're going to offer shares in Konkrete?
Yes, yeah.
How many shares are you going to sell?
Yeah, so we'll distribute an
So you're raising capital anyway. So
we are raising, right now through the private sale we are raising 3 million,
okay.
and then there will be an IPO which will be conducted through our existing platform. We are not going to list it on the ASX. We are using our own distributed ledger to list it, and through the retail offer there will be another 10 million which will be raised. But right now the private sale is 3 million.
So I think what you're asking is what's the minimum share price?
Well, I'm looking at what they're evaluating the company at, because you've got a share offer and they've got the IPO. What value do they put on their company at this moment? Because it's going to be 50% held by the Baron already.
So, number one, what we are really doing is the shares are really analogous to what typical tokens are in the ICO space. So instead of doing tokens, we are doing we are doing shares. And what we are saying is anybody who owns those shares will get a share of the revenue which the company gets in the future. So all the revenues, actually Sean and I won't make any revenue. We'll make revenue as shareholders alongside you, but we are going to issue pref shares which will rank ahead of us. And everybody, all the transaction fees which are generated on the platform are basically flown through straight to the investors. So we'll have a completely transparent mechanism by which we'll have smart contracts, we'll record transaction fees, all the transaction fees which the company is distributed as dividends.
So you're going to raise $3 million in the first instance, $10 million in the second IPO. You're going to hold half, so that's 15.
No.
That's $26 million.
No. So when I say half, there are two classes of shares: 50-50 ordinary shares, Sean and I, which is District Baron and Connected Campus. In total, over the life of the company, we will only issue a maximum of 100 million shares, which will correspond to 100 million tokens. We will never issue more than that. And what we are issuing right now is 3 million plus 10 million shares, and that share ownership gives you 100% of all future revenues, which is generated by the platform.
Cool. So I think we might wrap up. So yeah, as I mentioned, we're still releasing information on the site. So if you're interested, you can go there and sign up, be part of that community. We're actually obviously around as well to have one-on-one conversations and talk details. But again, I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight, and Arthur and Calvin and Mark for helping us put on the event to Konkrete, and obviously Jason for hosting us here. But yeah, really appreciate it. Thank you.